6 years after my sister stole my millionaire fiancé, the man I was about to marry, she walked into our mother's funeral with him. Flaunting her diamond ring, she smirked. "Per you, still alone at 38. I have the man, the money, and the mansion." I just smiled, turned to her, and asked, "Have you met my husband yet?" Her face went pale as I called him over, because my husband was actually. At 38 years old, I stood at my mother's funeral, a quiet dread settling in my stomach. The 6 years that had passed since my sister, Stephanie, stole Nathan, the man I was meant to marry, my millionaire fiancé, had done little to heal the wounds. I hadn't seen either of them since the day I discovered their betrayal. But as they walked in, Stephanie's smug smile flashing her diamond ring, I felt a surprising calm. She had no idea who I was now, or who I had married. My mother, Eleanor, was the unwavering anchor of our family. Growing up in a modest suburban home outside Boston, she was the one who instilled in me a sense of strength and dignity. Our bond deepened as I grew, and even after I moved to downtown Boston to build my career as a marketing executive, I called her almost daily. She was my confidant, my advisor, and my biggest cheerleader. When she was diagnosed with stage 4 pancreatic cancer 8 months ago, my world crumbled. Despite aggressive treatments, we knew our time with her was limited. Mother faced her diagnosis with remarkable grace, more concerned with her family's well-being than her own suffering. In her final weeks, surrounded by loved ones in the home where she had raised us, she slipped away while holding my hand. Her final wish for me was simple yet profound: to find peace in my life. 6 years earlier, at 32, my life had seemed a perfectly curated picture. I had a thriving career, a beautiful apartment, and a solid group of friends. Yet, a palpable sense of something missing lingered. I worked 60-hour weeks and dated sporadically, but nothing ever felt serious until I met Nathan Reynolds at a charity gala. Introduced by a college friend, Nathan was charismatic, with a confident air that commanded a room. A self-made tech millionaire at 36, he was the kind of success story magazines adored. Our connection was immediate, fueled by a shared love for art, travel, and ambitious goals. After our first date, an exclusive dinner overlooking the harbor, I called my mother and told her I had met someone truly special. Our relationship progressed quickly, a whirlwind of weekend trips to Martha's Vineyard, symphony performances, and intimate dinners. Nathan was attentive and generous, lavishing me with thoughtful gifts and elaborate dates. After 18 months, during a private dinner on a yacht in Boston Harbor, he proposed with a 5-carat diamond ring. I said yes without a moment's hesitation. My parents were ecstatic, especially my mother, who immediately began dreaming of the perfect wedding. Then there was my younger sister, Stephanie. Only 2 years my junior, we had a complicated history. As children, our bond was a fragile thing, constantly tested by competition. Stephanie always wanted what I had, from toys to friends to attention. If I achieved something, she had to match or surpass it. Mother always did her best to keep the peace, ensuring each of us felt uniquely loved. Despite our history, I chose Stephanie as my maid of honor, hoping my mother's belief that it would bring us closer was true. I wanted to believe we had outgrown our childish jealousy. I introduced Stephanie to Nathan at a family dinner, and she complimented him excessively. I noticed her touching his arm while laughing at his jokes, but I dismissed it as her usual charming self. At our engagement party, Stephanie helped my mother with decorations, but throughout the evening, I noticed her watching Nathan from across the room. When our eyes met, she quickly smiled and raised her glass in my direction. Later that night, my mother pulled me aside in the kitchen. "Rebecca, I've noticed Stephanie seems quite taken with Nathan," she said gently. "She's just being friendly, Mom," I replied, scrubbing champagne flutes. "Besides, she's dating that pharmaceutical rep, Brian." Mother nodded, but her expression held a lingering concern. "Just be careful, honey. You know how your sister can be when you have something she admires." I kissed her cheek, assuring her everything was fine. We were adults now, and Stephanie was happy for me. I was wrong, devastatingly wrong. 3 months before the wedding, I began to notice subtle shifts in Nathan. He started working later, and his texts came at odd hours. Our Friday date nights were frequently rescheduled, and when we were together, he seemed distracted, constantly checking his phone. More concerning, he began criticizing things he once adored about me. My laugh was too loud, my favorite dress looked washed out. My nightly reading habit was suddenly annoying. Meanwhile, Stephanie began calling more frequently, always with questions about wedding details. "I just want everything to be perfect for my big sister," she would say. While my mother was handling most of the planning, Stephanie volunteered to help with vendor meetings I couldn't attend. One evening, after a particularly strained dinner with Nathan, I found unfamiliar perfume on his collar while doing laundry. It was floral and heavy, nothing like my scent. When confronted, Nathan claimed he had been in a meeting with a potential investor who had hugged him goodbye. The explanation seemed plausible, and I wanted to believe him. My friend Allison tried to reassure me over coffee, calling my anxiety pre-wedding jitters. But the knot in my stomach refused to dissolve. My mother, too, noticed my anxiety during our weekly lunch. "You seem distracted, sweetheart," she said, touching my hand. I forced a smile and insisted everything was fine, but it wasn't. The final betrayal came during the cake tasting. Nathan, who had been looking forward to it for weeks, called claiming an unexpected meeting. "Stephanie can go with you," he suggested. "She knows my preferences anyway." When I hung up, I felt physically ill. How could my sister know my fiancé's cake preferences better than I did? The next day, while cleaning Nathan's car before a dinner party, I found a dangling silver earring with a tiny sapphire wedged between the passenger seat and the center console. I recognized it immediately as Stephanie's, a gift from our grandmother that she had worn to my engagement party. When I showed it to Nathan, his face remained perfectly composed. "Oh, your sister must have dropped it when I gave her a ride to the florist," he said smoothly. His story, and Stephanie's perfectly rehearsed explanation when I called her, only solidified my dread. I couldn't sleep. My weight dropped, and dark circles formed under my eyes. I started seeing a therapist without telling Nathan. 3 weeks before the wedding, Nathan suggested we postpone it. "You're not yourself lately," he said. I broke down, begging him to tell me what was wrong, but his eyes were vacant. That night, I woke at 3 a.m. to find his side of the bed empty. From the guest room, I heard his hushed voice. "Not now, she'll hear us." I know, soon, I promise." The next day, I decided to surprise him at his office with lunch. As I was leaving, my father called. "You're not eating properly. We're concerned." I assured him I was fine. The security guard at Nathan's building waved me through, and I took the elevator up to the 12th floor. Nathan's secretary, Margot, looked up, her eyes wide with surprise. "Rebecca, we weren't expecting you." She nervously blocked my path, but I pushed past her and opened Nathan's office door. The scene is burned into my memory forever. Nathan, leaning against his desk, his hands on my sister's waist, their lips locked in a passionate kiss. Neither noticed me at first, giving me several excruciating seconds to absorb the familiarity in their embrace that spoke of countless similar moments. When the door clicked shut behind me, they sprang apart. "Rebecca, this isn't what it looks like." Nathan recovered first, straightening his tie. Stephanie didn't even attempt the lie. "It just happened," she said, lifting her chin defiantly. A surprising calm washed over me. "How long?" My voice was steady. 4 months, Stephanie answered. "Since the engagement party. While I had been selecting wedding invitations and floral arrangements, they had been betraying me." Nathan, now hiding behind his desk as if preparing for a negotiation, said, "Sometimes feelings change. I was going to tell you, after the wedding." The lunch bag dropped from my hand. "I trusted you. Both of you." Stephanie, at least, had the decency to look uncomfortable. "It just happened, Becca." The childhood nickname felt like a violation. "Nothing just happens," I replied, my voice shaking. "For 4 months you made choices. Every secret call, every lie, every time you looked me in the eye." Nathan pressed the intercom button, and Margot appeared. Please escort Rebecca out. She's upset. I escorted myself out. You deserve each other, I said, my dignity somehow intact. In the elevator, the tears finally came. The drive home was a blur. I only remember calling my mother from the bathroom floor, unable to form coherent sentences through my sobs. She and my father arrived within the hour, using their emergency key. My mother held me while I told them everything, my father pacing, his face growing redder with each detail. I'll kill him, he muttered, clutching his chest. Thomas, your blood pressure, Mother warned, her own face etched with fury. The next days passed in a haze of pain. My mother helped me cancel the wedding arrangements while my father handled the financial aspects. I returned the engagement ring to Nathan's doorman, unable to bear seeing him again. I learned Stephanie had already moved her things in. Her clothes and family photos were now arranged on shelves that once held mine. Nathan's email about dividing our shared assets was coldly efficient, mentioning that Stephanie had helped him catalog my remaining belongings. Through mutual friends, I learned Stephanie had pursued him deliberately, finding excuses to see him alone. The betrayal ran deeper than I ever imagined. The scandal spread quickly through our social circle. Some friends sided with me, others with Nathan, citing his business influence. Their cowardice stung almost as much as the betrayal itself. My mother became my lifeline during those dark months. She brought me food, listened to my tearful rants, and stayed overnight when the loneliness became unbearable. She tried repeatedly to mediate between Stephanie and me, but our family dinners always ended in bitter arguments. One night, Stephanie snapped after I refused to pass her the salt. You always got everything first, Rebecca. The grades, the job, the apartment. For once, I got something before you did. I stood, throwing my napkin onto my plate. He wasn't a prize to be won, Stephanie. He was the man I loved and trusted. It was the last family dinner I attended with Stephanie present. The stress of the feud exacerbated my father's heart problems, and my mother aged years and months, the lines around her eyes deepening. 6 months after discovering the betrayal, I hit rock bottom. My therapist diagnosed me with depression. My work suffered as I struggled to focus, eventually losing a major client. When my boss suggested a leave of absence, I knew staying in Boston, where memories lurked around every corner, would only prolong my suffering. A marketing director position opened in our Chicago branch, and I applied immediately. 2 weeks later, I received the offer. My mother helped me pack, and as we sorted through my belongings, she gently asked, "Will you ever consider forgiving Stephanie?" I continued folding sweaters without looking up. "I don't know, Mom. Not now, maybe not ever," she said. "Forgiveness isn't about them deserving it. It's about freeing yourself." I am freeing myself, I thought. I'm moving to Chicago. My first weeks in Chicago were lonely and filled with doubt. My studio apartment felt sterile and unfamiliar. I worked long hours to avoid going home to empty rooms, eating takeout at my desk and falling into bed exhausted each night. Then, the news that twisted the knife deeper arrived. My mother called one Sunday morning, her voice cautious. "Rebecca, I feel you should hear this from me. Stephanie and Nathan got married yesterday." The small civil ceremony was featured in Boston Magazine's Society pages. The accompanying photos showed them beaming, Stephanie wearing a simple white dress, my former engagement ring prominently displayed on her finger. That night was my lowest point. I drank an entire bottle of wine alone, scrolled through old photos of Nathan and me, and cried until my eyes were swollen shut. I called in sick to work the next day. But something shifted during those dark hours. As morning light filtered through my blinds, I made a decision. This would be the last day I gave them power over my happiness. I deleted all photos of Nathan from my phone, blocked both him and Stephanie on social media, and took a long shower, imagining my pain washing away. At work, I threw myself into projects with renewed focus, developing a reputation for creativity and dedication. My first real Chicago friend was Madison, our HR director, who introduced me to her book club and a new social circle. 4 months into my new life, I was sent to a technology conference in San Francisco. There, I was seated next to Zachary Foster, a tech investor and entrepreneur. Zachary was different from Nathan in every way. Where Nathan had been flashy and charming, Zachary was understated and genuine. His quiet confidence and thoughtful questions drew people in without demanding attention. He asked for my card after dinner, and to my surprise, he emailed the next morning. Over the next 3 months, we maintained professional contact, referring clients to each other. "He likes you, Rebecca," Madison said one day, raising an eyebrow. "Not just professionally." "We're just colleagues," I insisted. "Colleagues don't look at each other the way he looks at you." Eventually, Zachary asked me to dinner. 20 minutes into the date, while discussing our favorite books, I had a full-blown panic attack. Instead of being embarrassed, Zachary moved to sit beside me, speaking calmly until my breathing normalized. He drove me home without pressure or questions. The next day, flowers arrived at my office with a note. "No pressure, no expectations, just hoping you're feeling better." That evening, I called him and shared everything about Nathan and Stephanie. He listened without interruption, then shared his own story of heartbreak from his past marriage, which ended when his wife left him for his business partner. "Broken trust leaves scars," he said. "Anyone worth your time will understand that healing isn't linear." Over the following months, we built a foundation of friendship. Zachary never pushed for more than I could give, respecting my boundaries while remaining steadfastly present. A year after moving to Chicago, I barely recognized my life. My promotion to senior marketing director came with a corner office, and I had fallen deeply in love with Zachary. His love wasn't flashy, it manifested in consistent, thoughtful ways. He remembered small details and never tried to change me. I maintained contact with my parents from a distance, steering conversations away from Stephanie. I visited twice a year, timing my trips when my sister and Nathan were away. My mother provided occasional updates about their perfect life on social media, luxury vacations and charity galas. "Stephanie asks about you sometimes," Mother mentioned during one call. "She gets quiet when your name comes up." My therapy continued, helping me process the betrayal and build healthier relationship patterns. Slowly, the nightmares about Nathan and Stephanie faded. One June evening, Zachary surprised me with a weekend trip to Michigan's wine country. For the first time in years, I felt completely present and happy. On our last night, walking through a garden at the Chicago Botanic Garden, Zachary stopped beneath a trellis covered in roses. "Rebecca," he said, taking my hands in his, "this past year knowing you has been the greatest gift of my life." When he knelt and produced a ring box, a brief flash of panic threatened to overshadow the moment. But looking into his eyes, I saw only sincerity and love. "I'm not asking for an answer today," he said, reading my hesitation. "I just want you to know that whenever you're ready, I'll be here." Tears filled my eyes, but not from fear or pain. "Yes," I whispered. "I'm ready now." The ring was a simple emerald with small diamonds, elegant and understated, like our relationship. That night, I called my parents with the news. "He sounds wonderful, darling," my mother cried. At my mother's urging, I sent Stephanie an invitation to the wedding. Her response came via a brief and cold email. "Congratulations on your engagement. Unfortunately, Nathan and I have prior commitments on that date. Best wishes for your future." My mother was disappointed but unsurprised. "Give her time, Rebecca. This is progress." Our wedding day was intimate and joyful. My father walked me down the aisle, whispering, "I haven't seen you this happy in years, kiddo." Zachary's vows acknowledged our journey. "Rebecca, I promise to remember that love is both strong and fragile, requiring care and commitment every day. I promise to be worthy of the trust you've given me, knowing how precious that gift is." We built our life together in Chicago. My career continued to advance, and Zachary's investment firm grew, focusing on supporting women-led tech startups. During a dinner with business associates, I learned a small but significant detail that connected my past to my present. A venture capitalist mentioned working with Nathan years earlier. Reynolds, yeah, he and Foster had quite a rivalry in the angel investing space about 7 years back, he said. Foster backed the right startup, Reynolds backed the competitor. Foster's pick got acquired for millions, and Reynolds went bankrupt. That night, I asked Zachary about it. I was going to tell you eventually, he admitted. I knew who you were when we met, not the details, but that you had been engaged to Reynolds. Why didn't you say anything? I wanted you to know me for me, not as someone connected to your past. I wasn't angry. The cosmic symmetry felt right. 2 years into our marriage, we began trying for a baby. After months passed without success, we started seeing fertility specialists. Through the disappointments and medical procedures, Zachary remained my rock. Then came the devastating call about my mother's cancer diagnosis. Zachary and I flew to Boston immediately. I took a leave from work to care for her, moving back to my childhood home temporarily. In her final weeks, Mother and I had precious conversations about life and family. One evening, she broached the subject of Stephanie. I wish you girls could find peace with each other, she said, her voice weak but determined. Promise me you'll try, Rebecca, not for her, but for yourself, and maybe a little bit for your old mother. I promised, not knowing if I could keep it, but wanting to give her peace. She passed peacefully 3 days later. I called Stephanie immediately, the first direct communication we'd had in years. Mom's gone, I said. Her sharp intake of breath was the only sound for several seconds. I'll be there in an hour, she finally replied, her voice breaking. We met at our parents' house, hugging briefly and awkwardly. The morning of the funeral dawned gray and drizzly. I stood before the mirror in my childhood bedroom, adjusting my black dress and wondering how I would survive the day. Zachary appeared behind me, placing his hands gently on my shoulders. I'm right beside you, he said, his eyes meeting mine in the reflection. At the funeral home, as the room filled with family and friends, a murmur rippled through the gathering. I turned to see Stephanie and Nathan entering, causing heads to turn and whispers to spread. Stephanie wore an expensive black dress and Nathan, looking uncomfortable, had his arm around her waist. Her left hand rested prominently on her purse, my former engagement ring impossible to miss. Thomas, breathe, I whispered to my father, who had stiffened beside me. They made their way forward. Rebecca, Stephanie said, her expression unreadable. It's been a long time. Yes, I replied simply. Sorry for your loss, Nathan said awkwardly, before Zachary stepped back to join me, our hands linking. Stephanie took the opportunity. I need to speak with you privately, she said, gesturing toward a side room. Against my better judgment, I followed her. Up close, I noticed fine lines around her eyes that her expensive makeup couldn't conceal. You look thin, she remarked. Grief does that, I replied flatly. She began fiddling with her ring, twisting it around her finger. Nathan and I bought a summer house on Cape Cod last month, 8 bedrooms, private beach access. She continued to boast, detailing their plans for a nursery. Congratulations, I said, my voice devoid of emotion. Is there something specific you wanted to discuss? Her smile turned sharp. I just thought you might want to know how well we're doing. Per you, still alone at 38. I got the man, the money, and the mansion. The familiar pain flared, then subsided. 6 years ago, her words would have devastated me. Today, they seemed pathetic. I smiled genuinely. Have you met my husband yet? Her expression faltered. Husband? I opened the door to find Zachary waiting nearby. Zachary, I called. Come meet my sister. As he entered the room, Nathan appeared behind him. When the men made eye contact, Nathan's face strained of color. Foster, he said, his confident demeanor cracking. Reynolds. Zachary's tone was professional but cool. It's been, 7 years? Not since Macintosh acquired Initech instead of your client CompuServe, right? Nathan swallowed visibly. You two are married? 2 wonderful years now, I confirmed, slipping my hand into Zachary's. Rebecca and I met at a tech conference in San Francisco. Nathan tried to recover his composure. Foster, we should catch up sometime. Zachary replied pleasantly but firmly. My schedule's quite full, but you can contact my office if you'd like. We had just taken our seats when my father clutched his chest, his face contorting in pain. Dad! I cried. Zachary immediately called for help. A doctor among the attendees examined him, determining it was likely stress and not another heart attack. Stephanie followed us, genuine concern on her face. Is he okay? Should we call an ambulance? Her voice shook slightly. The doctor says he's stable, I replied, surprised by her sincerity. For 20 minutes, we sat together in awkward silence, united only by concern for our father. When he insisted on proceeding, we returned to the main room. The brief crisis had created an unexpected truce. The funeral was beautiful and heartbreaking. When Stephanie rose to speak after me, she faltered, tears overwhelming her. Without thinking, I moved to her side, placing a supportive hand on her back. It's okay, I whispered. She gathered herself, completing her tribute with stories from our childhood that brought both tears and gentle laughter from the attendees. At the cemetery, rain fell softly as we laid my mother to rest. I noticed Nathan standing apart from the main group, checking his watch repeatedly. Stephanie remained by my father's side, her earlier bravado replaced by genuine grief. The reception at my parents' house was crowded with well-wishers, and Nathan's discomfort was evident as several business associates engaged Zachary in animated conversation. I overheard fragments about Nathan's company struggling with recent acquisitions, and I wondered if Stephanie's boasting had been a cover for financial troubles. The day after the funeral, after seeing Zachary off at the airport, I returned to my parents' house to find my father in the garden, a photo album open on his lap. She labeled everything, he said, showing me mother's neat handwriting beneath each photo. That afternoon, I began the painful task of sorting through mother's closet. In her bedside drawer, I discovered a journal. Inside, she had written periodic entries over the past decade, many of them mentioning her daughters, her hopes for our reconciliation, and her sadness at the rift between us. The final entry, dated just 2 weeks before her death, read, My greatest regret is leaving with my girls still estranged. Eleanor always fixed things, but I couldn't fix this. I pray they find their way back to each other somehow. The doorbell rang as I wiped away tears. Through the front window, I saw Stephanie standing alone on the porch. Father had gone to his brother's house for dinner, leaving me to face my sister alone. I opened the door, uncertain what to expect. Hi, she said simply. Can I come in? In the kitchen, I made coffee while she sat silently at the table. Without Nathan beside her, she looked smaller, less composed. Where's Nathan? I finally asked, placing a mug before her. At home. He doesn't know I'm here. She wrapped her hands around the mug but didn't drink. I told him I needed space after the funeral. I'm sorry about yesterday, she finally said. What I said in that room at the funeral home was cruel and completely inappropriate. I nodded, acknowledging her apology without immediately accepting it. I saw Mom's journal, she continued. Her last wish was for us to reconcile. I found it too, I replied. But reconciliation requires honesty. The dam broke, and words poured out between her sobs. You want honesty? Here's honesty. I'm miserable, Rebecca. She admitted Nathan had changed after their wedding, becoming controlling and critical. His business was failing, and the houses and vacations were all leveraged on mounting debt. Their marriage was a carefully constructed facade for business connections and social standing. He monitors my spending, checks my phone, questions my every movement, she admitted. The Nathan you knew doesn't exist anymore. Maybe he never did. Why stay, I asked. Shame, she answered immediately. How could I admit what I'd done to you, destroyed our family for something that turned out to be a mirage? And then there's the prenup. I leave with nothing. I pushed Mother's journal across the table. Read the rest of her entries. As Stephanie read, fresh tears flowed. She knew, she saw through everything, she whispered. Mom always did. I've hated myself for years. Stephanie continued. Every time Mom mentioned you, every accomplishment of yours she proudly shared, I felt the weight of what I'd done. She was planning to leave him. I don't expect forgiveness, she said. I don't deserve it. But I needed you to know the truth before I blow up my life again. We spent the next hours looking through my mother's belongings together, sharing memories both painful and precious. Stephanie recalled how Mother would never mix the separate batches of cookies because I liked chocolate chip and she preferred sugar. Remember how she used to leave notes in our lunchboxes? She asked, smiling through tears. Different messages every day. I nodded. We weren't instantly healed, but as evening fell, something had shifted. What will you do? I asked her as she prepared to leave. File for divorce when my lawyer says the timing is right. Rent a small apartment. Start over. She paused at the door. What about you? Will you go back to Chicago? Yes, I said. My life is there now, with Zachary. You seem happy, she said, a statement rather than a question. I am truly happy. I'm glad, she said. One of us should be. We hugged, briefly and awkwardly. It wasn't forgiveness, not yet. But it was a beginning. Back in Chicago, I settled into my life with Zachary, our brownstone, and my rewarding career. 6 months after my mother's funeral, I discovered I was pregnant. The joy was tempered with sadness that she wouldn't meet her grandchild, but I felt her presence in quiet moments. Stephanie and I maintained cautious contact through occasional phone calls. She had filed for divorce and was determined to rebuild her life authentically. The path that led me here was never one I would have chosen. Losing Nathan had seemed like the end of my world, but it had actually been the beginning of a far better one. With Zachary, I found not just love, but a partnership built on respect and unwavering support. Mother had been right about forgiveness being for ourselves. The weight of anger and resentment had lifted, allowing me to see my past with clarity and my future with hope. The scars remained, but they no longer defined me. As I sat in our nursery, Zachary painting the walls a soft green, I thought about the lessons I would someday share with our child. How loss can lead to finding. How endings create space for beginnings. How the hardest moments often direct us toward our truest path. My life had become richer and more authentic than I could have imagined during those dark days 6 years ago, not despite the betrayal, but because of how it forced me to rebuild with greater wisdom and intention.